Hello, students. Welcome to this lecture. As you can tell, it deals with chapters 15, 16, and a little bit strangely, chapter 27. I honestly wish that they dealt with some of the material in 27 in these earlier chapters just because they all have to do with pronominal suffixes. But I didn't write the book, so I don't get a say in that. But so this is just one instance where we're going to have to skip it a little bit ahead. You will see as we go on through this lecture that you are not required to read all of 27. I am asking you to focus on a very specific section of this chapter, so just keep that in mind. As you can tell from the subtitles here, we're dealing with possessive pronouns, pronominal suffixes on prepositions, and object suffixes. In any case, we're dealing with pronouns. So let's get into that. Here are some of the focus questions. How does Hebrew show that one item is possessed or owned by another? So, for instance, my house, my father, etc. Of course, in English, the way that we do that is what we have the pronoun placed in front of the actual noun. In Hebrew, it's going to be a little bit different. Secondly, how does Hebrew attach pronouns to prepositions? Or another way to put it is, how does Hebrew relate prepositions to pronouns? And we're going to see how that works in English. Here are just a couple examples. With us, here's your pronoun, here's your preposition. Preposition to, him being the pronoun, or for her, just a few examples of how we do it in English. It's going to be very different in Hebrew. Thirdly, how does Hebrew replace a noun, young man, with a pronoun, him, as a direct object? So, for example, Jacob sent him, meaning a young man, to Moab. Or, for example, if you were going to say, Sean or Shane went to the gas station, if you wanted to swap out a pronoun, you would say he went to the gas station. Or if you wanted to say Golda went to the tennis court, you would swap it with the pronoun she went to the tennis court, something like that. So we're going to learn a bit about how Hebrew does that kind of pronoun swapping. So here's just a little playful entry in, right? Certainly you all recognize this this particular reworking of the Last Supper. But yes, she kissed her brother, right? Here we have pronouns at work here. I am his father. And then, of course, this great Chewbacca sentence, I will rip your arm off. So we are working especially with these pronouns. Oh, and of course, we have the cute puppies. That's my toy. So those are the kinds of things we're working with. Possessive pronouns, object pronoun suffixes. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be working with only in Hebrew. Okay, so here is a chart of your basic possessive suffixes here on the left-hand side. Go ahead and take a look at that for just a minute. And while you're looking at it, I want you to shift your eyes over here to the right where we have the perfect endings of the verbs. Go ahead and take a look at them for just a minute, and then I want to discuss some similarities and differences. Okay. The reason I did this is because I want to show you how your previous knowledge of perfect endings can, in some cases, help you to recognize the pronominal suffixes showing possession. So let's just start. Not all of these are going to translate easily, or not all of the endings on perfect nouns are going to help you recognize suffixes on nouns. Sorry, I got to redo that sentence. Not all of the perfect verb endings are going to help you recognize suffixes on nouns, but some of them will. Let's start with the first one, shamarti, I guarded. Okay, this is a verb that we've had a lot. Let's look in particular at the ending, the T ending. Well, what is the first singular possessive? My house, beiti. Okay, so that E ending is similar to the T in I guarded, both being first person. Okay, the next one, second masculine singular, shamarta and betcha, not as much. The vowel is the same, right? But it's a ta as opposed to a cha. So that one isn't going to help us that much. Similarly with shamart, with second feminine singular, that's not going to help us with betech. Not so much. Neither with shamar, third masculine singular, or beto, there's just not a lot of common there. Now, when we get to third feminine singular over here, shamra, ends with a comments and a hey. Well, the possessive third feminine singular, her, It also ends with a comment and a hey, but there is a difference here, right? First of all, we're dealing with a noun in comparison to a verb, but then there's going to be this little dot right in there to tell you that you are looking at a possessive suffix, meaning her house. So that's just a little bit of a hint that the language gives you to give you a little bit of a hint of how to make this work. Okay. Let's turn now to the first plural forms, beitenu, right here. So this is the first plural possessive, our house. Let's then look over at the first plural of the verb, shamarnu. Now we're going to get a little bit of help here, right? Because they both have the nu ending. Okay, good. There's a little bit of help for us. Let's look at second masculine plural, you guarded. Really, it's better you all guarded, right? Shmartem. Notice that it ends with the M sound, tem. Over here, your house or you all's house, right, ends with chem. And so you have the same M ending when you compare second masculine plural possessive pronoun with the second masculine plural of the verbal form. Now with second feminine singular, this one ends with ten, this one ends with chen. They both do end with a noon. In fact, these are the only pronouns, the feminine ones are the only pronouns that end with this noon, and so you have the chen second and then on the noon in the third. Okay, and so that's really where the similarities end. So I think we're probably looking at like 60%, roughly maybe just over half of these have some kind of mnemonic connection that will help you learn a little bit better. What I highly recommend, you don't need to memorize every single chart that is going to be given to you in these chapters. I recommend definitely that you memorize maybe one of these charts so that you have a strong sense of the pronouns. You don't need to memorize all of them, but you do need to be able to recognize them. And so what I recommend that people do is they kind of set aside their flashcard stack so that you have the verbs and the pronouns mixed together, and that you let that kind of learn both at the same time, or reinforce your learning of the perfect while you're reinforcing your learning of these pronouns. And that often helps people just to see those connections. But you don't need to memorize every single chart that's found in the chapter. Memorize one really, really well, and then use it as a basis for trying to help yourself recognize the other the different forms that you're going to find. So okay, let's look here at some of the unexpected changes to vowels. When you put pronouns on the ends of nouns, sometimes it changes things a little bit. So let's do a little bit of a test here. Here's a chart of possessive pronouns placed on the word land. Do you remember what, in sort of its naked form, what is the word for land? The word is eretz, right? Now, when you attach pronouns to the noun eretz, you'll notice that the vowels do change a little bit, right? The vowels that are under, it's no longer two segols. You're actually working with a whole variety of different verbs. You just need to keep in mind that that can really be a challenge. And so one of the most important kind of exercises you can do to test yourself is go through these chapters and just kind of pick out random words and see if you can identify what the root noun of the word is. In other words, you might see this word artsenu, and one of the questions you'll want to ask yourself, two questions. One is, what is the pronoun ending, right? Is this I, you, we, his, something like that? So in this case, it's our, right? Whoops. Our land. And the second question to ask yourself is, what is the noun? Because the addition of the pronoun can make it a little bit confusing and difficult to identify what the base noun is. And that there are two reasons on display here. One is the fact that the vowels change, right? This doesn't say eretz. It doesn't have the segol E-class vowels. In fact, it says artsenu. So none of the original vowels are actually still there. It's all changed. So so that's not it though. That's one piece, is that the vowels underneath the consonants have changed. The second piece that makes this word particularly troublesome is the fact that we're used to seeing eretz with the final tzade, right, with that long tail that hangs down. But because the tzade in eretz is no longer a final consonant, then you see it in its non-final form. And so this can be a really confusing kind of thing, but that phenomenon where you have final forms that are no longer final when a pronoun is added, this is very common in the Bible. And so you need to learn to practice to kind of strip away the pronoun and say, what is this noun that I'm looking at, and be able to identify both the pronoun and the base noun. So just a little bit of a challenge there, but that's part of the practice. That's part of the sort of the kind of grammatical way of thinking that you're going to have to adopt in this chapter and really throughout all of Hebrew. Let's do just a little bit of practice. Whoops. Oh, look. Okay, we got a little bit of a problem here. I have a different idea. Let's try it this way. Okay, so the first noun here, yadi. Yadi, the base noun is yad, and it means hand. And so the E at the end, right, going back to our charts, what does that E tell us? It is my hand. My hand. Okay, let's look at the next one. Nafshech. Nafshech. Now, here's another one of those words where the vowels have really changed. In the case of yad, the vowels, the way you pronounce it suggests that the vowels aren't that different. In fact, it's just a shift from one A to another. So you still pronounce it yadi. It still sounds like yad. You'd probably be able to pick it up just by hearing it, even though, the vowel has changed, but they both sound like A. When you get to nafshech, things have really changed. What is the base level noun here? Do you remember? What is the lexical form of the noun? It's nefesh, right? Nefesh, which means soul or person. Now, they've added the second feminine singular pronoun, nafshech, your soul or your person. That's a tricky one, again, because the vowels have shifted around a little bit. Lachmam, lachmam, their bread. Now, the their here is actually masculine plural, right? Their bread. Their masculine plural bread. Now, what is the base what is the base form of the noun for bread? It's lechem, right? So once again, this one is a little bit tricky. This one's tricky for two reasons. First of all, because the vowels have changed. It no longer has the two segols, right? The two E-class vowels that look like three dots. Instead, it has these A vowels and the shva. So that's the first thing that makes this one challenging. The second one is that you no longer have. We're used to saying lechem with a final mem, right? With the boxy looking mem. But in this case, because the mem in the noun is not at the end, it looks like it's non-final form. So that's a little bit confusing. But this is translated as their bread. Avinu, okay, our father. Nu indicates the hour, and then Av indicates our father. Okay, Devara, her word, thing, or matter, right? Davar means any of those. Now, you can tell that this is a feminine singular possessive because of that dot in the hay. Remember that whenever you have the dot at the end of the hay, the dot in the hay in this pronoun, it refers to her, so it's her house. It's the possessive form. Okay, let's shift gears now to talk about verbs with object suffixes. So direct object pronouns can be expressed in two ways. One is by adding pronominal endings to et. Remember, et is the direct object indicator. So direct object is I opened the door, right? The door is the direct object. I struck a deal. A deal is the object. I struck the ground. The ground is the direct object. And so the et indicates that it is the direct object indicator, and Hebrew can add object suffixes to et. Okay, that's one. And secondly, by adding pronominal suffixes or object suffixes to verbs, so you can stick them directly on verbs. That's going to, of course, cause us some challenges and some problems, but we're going to work through them. And here we see the reference to chapter 27. from chapter 27, all we are worried about is page 316 and 317, where the chapter talks about these pronominal endings being placed at the end of verbs. So just a reminder, this is kind of a grammar 101 reminder. What is the direct object? Abraham smacked Joseph, and Abraham smacked him. So Abraham smacked Joseph. Joseph is the direct object here. Now, if we want to swap that out with a pronoun, we would say Abraham smacked him. In both cases, you're dealing with a direct object. Sarah ate the bread. Sarah ate it. The direct object is either bread or it. Both represent the direct object, but that's what we're trying to do now in Hebrew. Okay, here is the object pronoun chart. So this is what happens when you place when you place a pronoun at the end of at the end of the direct object indicator. So this is probably a chart that you will want to memorize, or at the very least know very, very well. Now take heart here. All of these endings, if you were paying attention to the last part of the lecture, you already know these endings, or at least you're already working on these endings. So if you have been practicing with the possessive endings, then you will have no problem recognizing these pronouns on the direct object indicator. That is one serious blessing, that the object endings are effectively the same when you compare the possessive pronoun endings with these object pronoun endings. So definitely worth looking at the connections, and of course there are also connections with these possessives as well, or there are connections with the possessives, and that's why I put the chart over here on the right. And the endings, as a reminder, are the ones that are outlined here. So you have the a white letter outlined in black. You'll notice many similarities. Okay. Just make sure you do that. Make sure you go through and take note of those similarities. It's going to help you begin to recognize these pronouns a little bit more easily as you're reading through sentences. I will say that one of the things that students struggle with the most every semester, this is true, students often struggle to look at a word, like maybe let's just look at betenu. They'll look at this word. The hardest thing is recognizing the pronoun, because of course when you're reading the biblical text or a sentence from the book, it doesn't, the endings aren't highlighted in this way. That's just to help us right now. And so learning to kind of strip away what was added here, what is the kind of base noun underneath this now compound word, and basically being able to pick apart the word. This is very difficult, especially for English speakers, because in most cases we don't attach words this way to one another to show possession. We have two separate words, right? Like just compare the English sentences here with the Hebrew. Our house in English, the two words are separated literally by white space, right? But in Hebrew, they bring them together. They glue the two segments together. They glue the pronoun together with the noun. That feels very foreign to most speakers of English, because it's just a strange way to do possession. At least it is for those of us who speak English as a primary language. So just be aware that this is a very difficult skill to acquire, and it will take you time. And don't be frustrated with yourself if even by the end of the semester you aren't able to look at these immediately and be able to tell. Sometimes it's going to take you a little bit of time, and that's perfectly acceptable. Let's do a little bit of practice, okay? Zacharnu otcha. Zacharnu otcha. We remembered you. Okay, so zacharnu, this will probably be familiar. First common plural, right? From zachar has to do with remembering, and the nu at the end tells you that it is we. Now, what are we doing here with otcha? Otcha, this is the direct object indicator et plus the second masculine singular pronoun. We remembered you, masculine singular object, right? So the object is the you, the verb is zacharnu. Hana'ar yikach ota. Hana'ar yikach ota. Hana'ar yikach ota. All right, that's our second sentence. And it is the young man, the because of the definite article. Na'ar is the word for young man. Will take her or it. Okay? This verb is tricky, right? This is one of our drop letter verbs. This is one of those imperfect verbs where the pronominal prefix where the first letter of the root lamed has dropped off. These are very tricky. Okay, but this is a third masculine singular, all imperfect. The young man will take her, and the her, of course, is the et plus the a. Right, the direct object indicator et plus the third feminine singular pronoun for her. The young man will take her, or also it. Right, we can also say that with these third person pronouns. So it could just simply be referring to a noun that happens to be grammatically feminine. Okay, next sentence. Zachru otam. Zachru. Oh, I gave you the answer ahead of time. Whoops. Zachru otam. Zachru otam. So, back to the answer. They remembered. Zachru them. They remembered. Zachru otam them. Now, the Zachru is probably relatively clear. This is a third plural. Perfect. Right? From Zachar, which has to do with remembering. Otam is et plus the third masculine plural. They remembered them, and this should be a masculine plural, them. Okay. Hana'ar yikach oto. Here I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball, right, compared to the sentence above. Hana'ar yikach, all the same, oto. So what's the difference here? What's the difference between oto and ota? Ota is the third feminine singular pronominal suffix. Oto is the third masculine singular. So the proper definition or translation of this sentence would be: the young man will take him or it. The young man will take him or it. Okay, now let's turn to prepositions, because just like object suffixes, just like nouns, prepositions can also take pronouns. This is how we do this in English. She sent money to him. Again, in English, we separate the preposition from the object. That's just how we do it. Hebrew doesn't necessarily do it that way. He stood before her, or in front of her. I walked to the store with him. They stood before her. We're trying to understand how Hebrew would do something like that. And the way that it does it often is to attach the pronoun directly to the preposition. Of course, the challenge here is you all have learned these prepositions kind of in isolation, or at least attached to nouns. Now we are going to have prepositions glued onto pronouns glued onto these prepositions, and you're going to have to work with that. It's very challenging. Just a quick observation here: most of the pronouns attached to prepositions are very similar to the pronouns you've already learned, making them very easy to recognize. Mean, however, is somewhat irregular. Sorry about the background noise. Mean is somewhat irregular in that just consult the chart in the book and you will see what I mean. But mean does require a little bit of special attention, just because some funny things happen there. So here's another chart. I want to do kind of a side-by-side comparison of one preposition chart, preposition plus pronoun chart, plus the possessive pronouns over here on the right. So here we're back to bait, house, and with all the attendant possessive prepositions. So let's look at my house, beiti, compared to imi, with me. So that's quite simple, right? We have the hirik and the yod at the end, just like we have hirik yod at the end of my house. Let's look at imcha, with you, second masculine singular, similar to beitcha. Okay, and then on and on and on. What you will see is that there are many similarities. Let's move to the plural just to look at them. There are a couple small differences here. But imanu, with us, in comparison to beitenu, our house. Again, they both have the new endings. Look at chem and chen of the second masculine plural, chem and chen of the second masculine plural here. With you, masculine plural, with you, feminine plural. Imahem and imam. You'll notice that there are actually two different versions here, and that's not too abnormal to have two different ways of doing it. In both cases, you have the preposition plus the mem ending, just like you have beitam, the mem ending for their house. And also for with them, feminine plural, imahen and iman, both of them end with noon, just as the third feminine plural ends with noon over here. So the point that I'm trying to make in doing these comparisons is to say that by learning one set of pronouns, you are automatically helping yourself to learn the other sets of pronouns, because there are so many similarities, especially when it comes to comparing the pronouns on prepositions with the possessive suffix pronouns on nouns, like we have over here on the right. Okay, now we're not going to go through this entire preposition chart. I just want to draw attention to something I mentioned earlier, the strangeness of mean, which is the preposition for from. Here's a good old im, which we were just looking at. You'll notice some really strange things happen. Let's just look at the first singular, imi, right? This is im plus e with me. Well, what if you wanted to say from me, mimeni? Okay, now some other things are going on. We have a secondary mem. The ending is still the same. It's still e, right? That is still there, but you do get the addition of another consonant. The vowels do some crazy things, and this is very true for mean. So from my perspective, you don't need to do a whole separate set of kind of flashcards for mean. What you need to train yourself to do is recognize the endings and recognize that mean does some strange stuff. And that is enough to be able to trigger in your mind, should be enough to be able to trigger in your mind that when you come across a strange word like this, you'll at least be able to recognize the E ending, and then perhaps also be able to remember, oh wait, mean is that strange preposition that does weird stuff. So look for the ending, and then if you start to see all these doubled mems like this, allow that to trigger in your mind, hey, look, we're working with that strange mean preposition. So it's definitely worth practicing a bit, recognizing mean, but I personally don't think that you need to memorize this entire chart unless that's just how you like to roll, unless that's just how you like to do things. But I think the endings are sufficiently similar that you will probably be able to memorize just one of these charts. Whoops, sorry about that. Just one of these prepositional charts, and then be able to look at the others and piece together what in fact you are looking at. I think you can be efficient in that way and still also be successful. Let's do a little bit of practice with these sentences. Yosef lakach mimeni lechem. Yosef lakach mimeni lechem. Okay, so we have Joseph, right? What did he do? He took from me, mimeni. Right, go back here. Mimeni, he took from me, lechem, bread. He took bread from me. That's sentence number one. Joseph, subject of the verb. Lakach is your third masculine singular verb, and then we have your preposition, of course. From me, and then the object. What did he take? He took bread. Next sentence. Rachel halcha lefanav u'Moshe achareha. Ooh, that's a tough one. Rachel halcha lefanav u'Moshe achareha. Okay, begin to piece together what you recognize. Rachel, there's your subject, right? Rachel. What did Rachel do? Halcha, she walked or she went, and now things get a little bit tricky. Lefanav, this is lifnei, the preposition lifnei, plus the third masculine singular vav. So before him or in front of him, u'Moshe, and Moses, acharecha, after her. Now, acharecha is the preposition for after plus the third feminine singular ha. Okay? That there are a couple prepositions in here that are a little bit difficult to recognize, especially the lefanav and the achareha. Those are a little bit challenging to recognize. That's why I think you need to practice a lot in these chapters. Just practice going through the sentences over and over again and then using your answer key to make sure that you are properly identifying the pronouns on these prepositions. Just to reiterate, what students struggle with most in this chapter is recognizing pronouns and then being able to reconstruct what the base word is to which the pronouns are attached, because that also helps them recognize the definition. Okay, let's go to the next sentence. Shalachti alehem lechem. Shalachti alehem lechem. Shalachti alehem lechem. Okay? I sent to them, this is the preposition el, I sent to them, and then the hem is them, lechem. I sent bread to them would be the colloquial way to do it in English. If you wanted to be really wooden about it, you could say, I sent to them bread. Perfectly reasonable translation. All right, now this next one's a little bit of a curveball. It's similar to the last sentence, but it contains one interesting change. Shalachti, so good. So far, so good. Elayich lechem. Shalachti elayich lechem. Shalachti elayich lechem. Okay. First word, shalachti, I sent to you, feminine singular. So here's your feminine singular ending with the preposition el, right? To. But there's some funny stuff going on under there with both vowels and consonants. Lechem. I sent to you bread. I sent bread to you would be a perfectly acceptable translation. Challenging. Keep practicing with these. It will come to you eventually, but focus on those endings and focus on recognizing and reconstructing what that base word is. So practice reconstructing that this is el. Practice recognizing that this is the second feminine singular pronoun. And that's you need to get into that habit of doing that kind of reconstructive work as you read, and it will eventually become quite secondary, but it will take some practice. Last one. Rachel sham'a alav mehem. Rachel sham'a alav mehem. Rachel heard, sham'a, right? And then Rachel, of obviously Rachel, heard about him or it. So this is the preposition all, which is upon, about, or concerning. Rachel heard about him or it from them. Mayhem. So that's the mean plus the hem. Okay. If you have a Hebrew headache like this poor dog, it's absolutely understandable. There was a lot of material here. Let me give you some study tips. Focus on memorizing the possessive endings in chapter 15. This is going to help you big time with memorizing the pronouns attached to the direct object and preposition and also to the verbs. For my money, I say focus first on memorizing those possessive endings, and I think that what you will find as you move on to direct objects and prepositions and even to the verbs in chapters 26 through 27, you will find that knowing those possessive endings from chapter 15 is going to help you immensely with learning the object and the direct object pronouns and the prepositional pronouns, and also the pronouns attached as suffixes to the verb. So you don't need to memorize every list. Focus, I say, on chapter 15 and then work out from there. The best thing you can do for practice after you feel a little bit, kind of confident in your memorization of the possessive endings in chapter 15 is just go through sentence after sentence using the answer key to double check yourself. And that practice of just learning to recognize the difference between the pronoun and the noun or the preposition or the object indicator to which it is attached, that is the best kind of practice that you can do this week. So I know there's a lot there, and if you have any questions at all, you should absolutely feel free to reach out to me. You should absolutely bring whatever questions you have into the tutoring sessions or into our class sessions together, and we will make sure that those questions get answered. I think the key here, like I said, is to memorize those possessive pronouns in chapter 15 and then kind of work out from there and test your knowledge using the sentences. Thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if I can be helpful. Thanks.